The Metropolitan Police say they have dropped their inquiries into Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The force said they'd found no evidence to support newspaper claims he'd asked a bodyguard to carry out checks on Virginia Giuffre. President Trump vows serious retaliation against the Islamic State group after an ambush in Syria in which 3 Americans were killed. And off the bench, back in the team, Mohamed Salah returns to the Liverpool squad after the war of words with his manager. Hello, good evening. The Metropolitan Police say they found no evidence that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor asked a bodyguard to investigate his accuser, Virginia Giuffre. The force had been investigating since October media reports that Andrew had asked a protection officer to dig into the background of Miss Giuffre. Andrew has always denied any wrongdoing. In a statement today, the force said while it had found no additional evidence of criminal acts or misconduct, they remain committed to assessing any new information. Helena Wilkinson reports.
In October, a newspaper claimed that Prince Andrew had given his police protection officer Virginia Giuffre's personal information, allegedly to try to dig up dirt on her. The Mail on Sunday claimed the then Prince gave the officer her date of birth and social security number ahead of the publication of this photograph showing him with his arm around Miss Giuffre. She accused him of sexually abusing her. He consistently denied the allegations against him. Miss Giuffre took her own life earlier this year and was one of Jeffrey Epstein's most prominent accusers. The Metropolitan Police had looked into the newspaper claims. In a statement today, it said its assessment had not revealed any additional evidence of criminal acts or misconduct. The force added that should new and relevant information be brought to its attention, including in the release of material in the US, it would assess it. The statement means that Mr. Mountbatten Windsor will not face any police action over the paper's claims, for now at least. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor will no doubt be relieved at the decision by the Metropolitan Police. He's still living at Royal Lodge here in Windsor Great Park, but not for long. He'll be moving to Sandringham, the King's estate in Norfolk. When that'll happen is not clear, but it's expected to be early next year. The family of Virginia Giuffre have tonight expressed their deep disappointment and said the investigation had been dropped without explanation and without speaking to them. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News.
Well, in other news, the Buckingham Palace says the King is delighted by the widespread and thoughtful response to the broadcast he made about cancer yesterday evening. Cancer charities have praised him for emphasising the importance of early screening in a message for the Stand Up to Cancer campaign. A spokesperson for the King said that if the statement had contributed to the public good, then it would have been both the King's pleasure and duty. 3 Americans, 2 soldiers and a civilian interpreter have been killed by the Islamic State group in Syria, according to the US military. The soldiers came under fire during a joint patrol with Syrian forces near the central city of Palmyra. Syria has condemned the attack. President Trump said there would be serious retaliation.
This was an ISIS attack on us and Syria. And again, we mourn the loss and we pray for them and their parents and their loved ones. Very, very sad.
Mr. President, will the U.S. retaliate against ISIS?
Yeah, we will.
Sean Dilley is outside the White House for us this evening. That was a pretty strong response from the President, Sean.
Strong, reasonably so, yes, and it was made just behind me here not that long ago, but it's not out of line with comments you might expect from any of President Trump's predecessors, really, where Americans have been targeted in conflict or by terrorists. What is significant about this issue is the closeness of relations between Syria and the United States. The President very much at pains to talk about the attack being on Syrian and US troops, and Ahmed al-Sharaa, once upon a time a sworn enemy of the United States, an al-Qaeda leader, once upon a time no less. But ever since he helped to depose his predecessor Bashar al-Assad in Syria last year, relations have had to possibly by necessity be closer. Last month he was invited into the Oval Office here behind me, and I think the quid pro quo for that and for relieving some of those restrictions and some of those sanctions on Syria that have been crippling is President Trump would like very much the support of Syria when it comes to easing tensions in the region, because it has been very hot there, not just domestically, but with the surrounding countries. We do know that 2 soldiers had died along with an interpreter who was a US citizen, and we know that 3 others who were injured are said to be doing very well. None as yet have been named by US authorities.
Sean Dilley at the White House, thank you. The US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to meet Ukraine's President Zelensky tomorrow in Berlin ahead of a European leaders meeting there on Monday. The White House was initially stalling on the decision to send a team. President Trump said they would only travel if he thought enough progress was being made. In Ukraine, more than 1 million households are currently without electricity after an overnight barrage of Russian attacks that struck power stations and port infrastructure. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner has this report.
Dealing with the damage. Ukraine's southern city of Mykolaiv was targeted by Russia, injuring 5 and cutting power to homes as the temperature falls. Ukraine desperately wants a ceasefire now, but Russia wants a deal first that Ukraine says is tantamount to surrender. Peace talks brokered by the Americans appear to have achieved little so far. Steve Witkoff, the US presidential envoy, has been accused of being far too sympathetic to Russia. But Donald Trump wants a deal with Putin, and he's losing patience with Ukraine and its European backers. Earlier this week, he showed some of that impatience.
They would like us to go to a meeting over the weekend in Europe, and we'll make a determination depending on what they come back with. We don't want to be wasting time. Sometimes you have to let people fight it out.
One sticking point is Ukraine's nuclear power plant at Zaporizhzhia, now under Russian control. One proposal is to put it under UN supervision, but Moscow is reluctant to agree. And it's clear that US policy is moving closer to Russia and away from Europe.
Unfortunately, Zelensky is under pressure. He's considered to be a nuisance by the Americans, particularly Donald Trump, and the Europeans are not far behind. So it's clear that there is a personal ambition and a mission by Donald Trump to get this deal done before the end of the year and before Christmas.
And all the while, this war continues. Russia is slowly advancing at huge cost in lives. But Ukrainians fear if they give in now to Russian demands, they will eventually lose their whole country. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
It's believed more than 600 migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats today. The Border Force said it had been 28 days since the last small boat managed to cross successfully. That's the longest spell without an arrival since 2018. Here's Duncan Kennedy.
This Border Force vessel made its way into Dover Harbour, having picked up the migrants in the Channel. They're the first group to make it to British shores in 4 weeks, one of the longest periods without any landings in recent years. It's believed around 600 people made the crossing today, taking advantage of the calmer weather that enabled the dinghies to make it off French beaches. The government will be disappointed that the migrants have started coming across the Channel again. Last month, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, announced a series of new measures aimed at stopping the boats, including making asylum status in the UK temporary and subject to review every 30 months. Officially, this year, more than 39,000 people have made the crossing, up 16% on the same period last year. The greatest single year of crossings was in 2022, when more than 45,000 people made it over the Channel. The Conservatives say the government's one-in, one-out policy with France is no deterrent, as only around 150 migrants have been removed since September. The French authorities have now agreed to intercept small boats as soon as they enter the water, as long as they don't have any passengers on board. But today's arrivals at Dover show many of these policies are challenged when the weather favours the smugglers and the migrants. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
The British Medical Association has accused the Health Secretary of scaremongering after he warned that the resident doctors' strike in the run-up to Christmas would push the NHS to the brink of collapse as it deals with the flu outbreak. Strikes are due to begin on Wednesday in England unless BMA members back a new deal in a ballot that closes on Monday. Helen Catt is here, so ballot's still being cast. But the Prime Minister's made his thoughts clear.
Yeah, pretty strong language this morning from the Prime Minister. Writing in The Guardian, he said that for these strikes to go ahead during this flu outbreak would be reckless beyond belief. And he has called on the BMA, appealed to members directly to accept the offer from the government. He's also said that an offer was made to the BMA to move the strikes to the other side of Christmas. And this is all the sort of similar language to what we're hearing from the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who's talked about being extremely worried about a double whammy of these strikes and more flu patients being in hospital. But the BMA, as you said, has said this is scaremongering, that it is risking making people believe that the NHS wouldn't be able to look after them. And they want the Health Secretary to concentrate instead on changing the offer to them. What is in that offer? Well, currently what is on the table is a promise to prioritise by law British medical graduates over overseas graduates for specialist training jobs, and a promise to help with training costs, things like covering exam fees. But crucially, what is not in it is an offer on pay. And the BMA has been clear that they want to see a significant drop in real terms that they say they've had in wages since 2008 reversed. Keir Starmer says that resident doctors' pay has increased by just under 29% in 3 years.
Helen, thank you very much. Police say they are in the process of charging and remanding a 26-year-old man suspected of criminal damage after a village Christmas tree was cut down just hours after its lights had been switched on. The tree in Shotton Colliery, County Durham, had been put up to commemorate the village's war dead. Ollie Constable reports.
It's been standing in the middle of the village for more than a decade. Just hours after the lights had been switched on, police say they think it was deliberately felled.
I cut to the train. I was absolutely devastated.
Steve Maitland chairs the community group here.
I actually got the phone call at 22:11 and I thought it was a bit of a hoax, actually. We've never had anything like this happened, you know what I mean? It's just horrendous. Jesus touched everybody in the village.
This tree was originally put up here as part of a memorial to fallen soldiers from World War I. But as you can see now, it has been cut down. The community has been left very upset by what's happened.
Now the community has come together to crowdfund for a new tree and a plan to right the evergreen for Christmas.
We've had the tray slaved. The tray's going to be lifted into the slave tomorrow, so we'll have the tray lit up for all the Christmas period. We get the old tray dug out and a new one planted and have some form of celebration when we do that.
Ollie Constable, BBC News.
Liverpool's Mo Salah was handed an early reprieve from the bench this afternoon, coming on in the first half in their game against Brighton. The forward has not started any of Liverpool's last 4 matches and complained last Saturday he'd been thrown under the bus by head coach Arne Slot. Ben Croucher has the story.
Mo Salah back at Anfield, back in a Liverpool shirt at the end of a week where we weren't sure we'd see either again. He was on the bench once more against Brighton, but that's not something he's sat down and taken quietly of late. Last weekend at Leeds, he didn't come on, said he was getting the blame and had no relationship with manager Arne Slot. And after being dropped and training on his own in the week, he actually played today and laid on a goal. Problem? What problem?
There's no issue to resolve. For me, he's now the same as any other player. You talk to your players if you're happy or unhappy with things, but there's nothing for me to talk about after what happened.
Only 2 players have more goals for Liverpool. Only in May he was celebrating the Premier League title as top scorer. But does he still have a future on Merseyside?
He's been a great servant for Liverpool. He didn't like being dropped, but you know, if you're a Liverpool fan, you hope that there can be an agreement where Mo Salah stays on.
His immediate future? Well, not at Anfield. He's away with Egypt at the Africa Cup of Nations for the next month, but he is back at Liverpool, for today at least. Ben Croucher, BBC News.
Before we go, here's Laura Koonsberg with what's coming up on her programme tomorrow morning.
The Christmas tree's up. It's our final show of 2025 and we'll be joined on BBC One at 9 tomorrow morning by the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood to talk about how to keep women and girls safe. And we've a holiday treat from Kate Winslet and friends. So don't miss it. See you on BBC One tomorrow morning at 9.
I look forward to that. That's all from me this evening. Have a very good night.